I am back to talking about Johanna Olson-Kennedy, one of the gender clinicians who are not our friends, are being LGBT people who care about the growing young people in our future populations. You can watch previous videos for context. In this video, I'm going to talk about Johanna Olson-Kennedy destroying the function of minors in her care, which I assume she's done. And I want to make a medical legal disclaimer that I don't have evidence of specific accusations against her, but this is my opinion, and she's been puberty blocking tweens, and then talking about later about loss of sexual function in puberty blocked males. In the first Gender Clinicians Are Not Our Friends, we have a clip of Dr. Marci Bowers, a vaginoplasty surgeon, admitting all 10 or 2 blocked males are not able to achieve orgasm and that this is permanent.
Every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero.
Bowers admits this is very damaging to the formation of healthy adult relationships because Bowers, among other things, has worked on female genital mutilation victims. They do this to females in some African and Islamic cultures. It's vile.
It's important in relationships, and I know that from my work with female genital mutilation survivors, that the lack of being able to be intimate with a partner is very important.
This is ironic that Bowers has now performed essentially male genital mutilation on minors who have been sexually lobotomized with chemical castration drugs given to them before they were old enough to have any sense of their sexual orientation or sexual feelings, who could have possibly been future young, effeminate gay men. There's a banned YouTube channel called Excellentic. It's on Odyssey now, and I don't agree with all of her takes, but she does have some very good commentary on her videos, and she exposes really this medical malpractice that's going on with these gender surgeons. And she made the point that female genital mutilation is illegal in the United States. There are jail sentences for some, maybe it varies by state. What Bowers did to Jazz Jennings at age 17 and other puberty blocked males, that would be the same thing as female genital mutilation. So why isn't this illegal? I wanted to make that point, but not take credit for it. But it's a good point. I just want to shout out to the Q-woke, the quoke, gays and lesbians who are supporting all of this. I think those of us who do not support it and are willing to get up on a podium and argue why this is doing more harm than good should communicate to you that you are endorsing also this trail of damage that goes along with your trans allyship and trans validation and this affirmation that you think is going to make trans youth lives so much better. I'll be questioning some of that later. I don't believe in pushing the narrative that there is a trans child, even if that child is a persister who's an adult who will definitely seek medical transition, even if given an opportunity to change that person's mind. But let's go with the best case scenario of the affirmative model advocate and the LGBT people and progressives who support this, okay? The puberty blocked males. This has already been done to, at the very least, hundreds, if not thousands, of Tanner 2 males. There are 8,000 parents in the Parents of Trans Children Facebook page. Many of them have males on puberty blockers. We know that Johanna Olson-Kennedy has blocked a bunch. The other clinics have. They've done it in the UK. There are hundreds of gender clinics opening up all over the United States. They've been doing this at Boston Children's, UCSF, LA Children's for years now, okay? Possibly could be thousands of essentially chemically castrated male children, okay? Let's go with 2,000. Let's say 5% of them could have desisted. I have a previous desistance research stat averaged 67% desistance rate of DSM positive. So let's go with some of the lower regret rates of adults who have undergone gender transition. Let's say 5%. That's like 100 potentially gay men with completely destroyed genitals. Do you understand the numbers of pointlessly medically mutilated healthy bodies we are talking about here? How do you not care about this, even in best case scenarios? Doing that to a person. Imagine you woke up and somebody compassionately, under anesthesia, had given you a double mastectomy or removed parts of your genitals. Why is that any better? Because these kids are 11-year-olds. Why is that better? Explain to me. Why is that morally better than forcing tweens to make this decision and not picking the perfect one? Of course, dysphoric youth who are going to persist need to be heard and respected and supported. But minors are not adults. They are not profoundly wise little spirits that you should worship. It is adults' responsibility to caretake youth, to protect them from their short-term impulses, to help them emotionally regulate, to love them, to understand them, to help them plan for a longer and healthier future. These are 10 to 12-year-olds, and it's continuing. There's no strong evidence this is life-saving for them. And it comes with a lot of health problems and medical dependencies and risks. Johanna, if they want fake tits later, they can go and get them. Olson-Kennedy, that's my pet name for her.
If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
Has known about this since at least 2016. I'm not a legal expert, but I believe her public statements put her and her hospital at risk for medical malpractice lawsuits. And it represents not only her arrogance and fanaticism, but her stupidity. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to stand up in front of a room full of people or post comments on Facebook admitting that you have completely nuked the sexual function of the minors under your care. That might be something you might want to STFU about. That is probably the wise thing to do from an ass covering perspective, and not announce it in front of rooms full of people or Facebook pages. People can be smart enough to get into medical school, but really stupid in other ways. I do hope the statements she's made put her at risk for medical malpractice lawsuits. Here's a Facebook comment. Thanks for this ongoing rich discussion. I think the difficulty in producing data around younger folks getting genital surgery is that it is cost prohibitive for most families. Additionally, looking at factors of postoperative quality of life and other mental health outcomes will likely be largely influenced by the fact that the folks who do not have the resources have opportunities that others do not. But one of the major points here is thinking about the brass tacks of these young people who have non-functioning genitals, that's in caps, because they had the extraordinary opportunity to avoid male pubertal maturation. Are the folks that feel concerned about earlier surgeries thinking that at some point these young women will stop feminizing hormones and let their genitals mature? Or do others feel like these women are going to all want functioning vaginas, but we shouldn't allow them to get them until they are older? And I certainly am not implying that those youth who seek care are more trans than those who present post-puberty. It is just in the case in my practice that the young women who are really putting their lives on hold are those that were blocked in early puberty. Micropenis anorgasmia. Too late for them. This is Gender Odyssey Conference, Seattle 2017.
Now, how many people saw the episode of Jazz where she went to the surgeon and the surgeon's like, you can't have a vagina? Ugh. Okay, so for folks who didn't see it, for people who are blocked, let's go back to this for a minute. For people with testicles who are blocked in Tanner stage 2, they do not have a lot of penile tissue. And when you do a procedure that you use the tissue of the penis to make a neovagina, usually you would just do an inversion and use that tissue, but if you don't have a lot, you need to do graft from another part of the body, usually scrotal tissue. There are other ways that people do this. It does not preclude you from having vaginoplasty, but I want people to think about this. There's something that's important, and we have to think about these things, right? Blocking is one tool. It's an awesome tool for a lot of people, and what does that mean? Does that mean that trans feminine, trans girls who get blocked in Tanner 2, we are making the assumption that all of them are going to have genital surgery? Are we doing that? Because we might be doing that. I'm just saying that we might be doing that.
We might be doing that. See how cavalier she is? I want to highlight, I think this is a human rights crime, regardless of adult outcome. It is worse, in my opinion, to do this to a desister youth, a youth who would not have medicalized even if they got up into age 25 years old, and would just live as a healthy gay man. I do think that's the worst case scenario in this. However, this is also a human rights violation against any young person, even someone who would seek transition later, and I want to argue why that is. First off, there's just the brain development issues. Your brain is undergoing the way it's going to be wired as an adult through puberty, so that's very important, and there's some indication that this might affect IQ and probably how your brain works, maybe mood later, bone health, other issues. Okay, so there's that. I know that these youths say they really want to medicalize underage, like Nikki tutorials and people like that. But you cannot change your sex. And there are huge costs to medicalization in terms of health and safety and financial costs and burdens to the medical system. You just cannot change your sex. The affirmative model deludes children in very unethical ways who cannot really conceptualize the long-term consequences. They should not be medically deformed and surgically hacked up underage. It's as simple as that. Many males, and here's the type of thing that they cannot think through. Many males, including homosexual transsexuals, not just autogynephiles, who are, that AGP is a heterosexual male, inverted paraphilia. But they do not choose to have bottom surgery, which is why the fact that they have done this to possibly thousands of male children is child abuse. That's what it is.
I'm just saying that we might be doing that, right? And so that actually, that is worthy of a conversation, right? Because many trans women do not have genital surgery. Love their genitals, enjoy their genitals, like to use them. That's fantastic. We love people to love their bodies and use them and enjoy them. That's a great human place to be. But we have to ask ourselves, if you have Tanner 2 male genitals, are you going to be able to use them? Are you going to want to use them? Or are we just assuming that everybody is now going to have to say, well, I either need to go through puberty to get adult-sized genitals, or I'm going to have these genitals that I have, or I'm getting surgery. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. All bottom surgeries are horrific, and I don't personally recommend them. But after you have stunted genitalia, it's even more cruel and ghastly. They have to use part of the colon or the peritoneal lining around the stomach. And this is what we saw happen to the headed for necrosis, vaginoplasty, collapse disaster that Jazz Jennings experienced. It's horrible what these people did to that young person. If you want some proof, plenty of trans-identified males, including homosexual transsexuals, like their dicks. All you have to do is search hashtag lesbian or hashtag gay or hashtag bisexual or hashtag trans on social media, and whether you want to see this or not, you will see many hyper-sexualized, very stereotypically female sexualized porny images of homosexual transsexuals in full states of arousal. I wrote a blog post a while back called All I Wanted Was a Lesbian Spanish Tutor, and all I got was dozens of pages of lesbian porn. Lesbian Spanish MILFs, lesbian Spanish teachers seducing their students, lesbian Latina sorority sisters gang banging their Spanish college professor. All of this ladyboy porn caters to GAMPs, gynoandromorphophiles, who are hot for feminized males. It's a type of bisexuality. They've studied it a little bit, probably needs more research. I'd rather these subjects just be gays in healthy bodies, but if people are going to do this, and there are men with this type of bisexual orientation who desire them, maybe don't bomb their sex organs at age 10 to 12. Maybe don't do that. There was a show called Inside Amy Schumer. Schumer interviewed Bailey J., who's a porn star, who's intact, who's in a relationship at the time, and out, and was very pretty and interesting looking, actually. And of course, there was drama around Amy not asking the right questions, which is always the case with this issue. But let's set aside the fact that I and others think medical transition and doing porn is maybe a bad thing to do with your body. But isn't an intact male in an out relationship with a guy who's into that a better outcome than a sexually dead young person with butchered sex organs who has to dilate their scar tissue so the wound won't close up? Isn't that a better outcome? Why are you doing this to tweens? I care about feminine males. I think there should be allyship between women and effeminate males. I think there has been in some cultures. It's this ideology and glorification of extreme surgeries to growing people that I'm objecting to. I wish GAMP would be taken out of its primary domain in porn and prostitution, because then some of these males could actually find long-term loving relationships, since there are males with this orientation, rather than begging for money on OnlyFans. You can listen to a Heterodorks episode on GAMPs and just how porny that whole scene is, just online and in real life, and the trans chasers, and I've been in Twitter chat rooms that the exploitation and the sense of feeling used by some of these, young males is very heart-wrenching. I just want to reinforce my point that medicalizing tweens to sterilize them and harm their physical health and their sexuality long-term is unethical, regardless of the persistence issue from childhood gender dysphoria.
There are men that specifically seek out post-op.
Hardly any. Not worth considering.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Really?
Really.
Really?
So if you are a trans woman and you want to have a larger dating pool of men, you should not have bottom surgery. You should not have vaginoplasty.
Somehow I thought that there were, I thought there were groups of men that were into that.
Not nearly as large as there are men who are into having intact malehood on their feminized males.
Lynn Conway is an onogonophile, in my opinion. One of the creepy ones who really went after Ray Blanchard and Alice Drager for exposing the motivations behind autogynephilia, which is paraphilic. A loss of these capabilities could ruin the woman's chances of experiencing her full humanity after transition, especially for finding and enjoying a passionate, deeply bonded love relationship. A National Center for Transgender Equality survey said that 34% of respondents don't want or know if they want vaginoplasty surgeries. 55% say they do not want face feminization surgeries. God, you're just gonna medicalize the fuck out of these kids as young as possible, aren't you? That's what you're gonna do. In the most extreme way possible, the most maximized way possible, as young as possible. That's what you're going to do. Young people today, in general, are so trigger protected and over medicated, and they aren't learning any coping skills. Young trans people, even ones who've been fully affirmed, they do not have great coping skills. Just Google it. Just watch their videos, their TikTok videos. It is drama and mental instability and paranoia and rage. This is a larger philosophical debate about not treating young people as wise little spirits, but guiding them. I think maybe the best argument I've heard for medicalizing young people is that, oh, trans people who don't pass can't get jobs. I think out gays and lesbians had that problem too. At one point in the 70s and 80s, they lived in urban areas. Trans is all the rage. There's plenty of woke businesses now. Because medicalizing minors has a whole host of other problems, like the bone impacts, the decreases in IQ, probably, the sterilization, prevention of desistance from GD. Medically deforming them to allow them to pass better itself has a whole host of other problems, like the stress of living stealth or violating other people's sexual and emotional boundaries.
If you are a post-operative trans person, you don't necessarily need to disclose. But what a lot of critics will say is that the trans person is being deceptive or dishonest. They're lying about who they are if they don't disclose their trans status. And so regardless of kind of, your genitals as a trans person, that statement says a lot about the person who's making it. Because they are basically saying that being transgender is a lie. That a trans woman presenting herself as a woman, going out on dates, maybe going home with a man, is withholding the truth from him. She's denying him all the information, the ability to consent.
It seems a fair number of these young transitioning males are perpetrating sexual boundary violations by having sex with unknowing heterosexual men.
What you will see is a lot of people on the internet saying that, oh no, you have to disclose, you have to tell a guy that you're trans if you're sleeping with him or you're going out on dates with him, whatever, because otherwise you're deceiving him, you're tricking him, and blah, 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 and fuck that bullshit. Seriously, that is no good. That's not useful for trans people, and that's not useful for men or anybody else to think like that. And so it doesn't matter what you want to do so long as you are doing what you want. And that is all there is to disclosure.
I'm sure the gender clinicians who are facilitating this lack of sexual consent think that men who object to having a medically altered male on his penis is just some horrible bigot.
as the idea of deception is highly subjective, and within a lot of people just can't bypass those internal beliefs and paradigms they have created for themselves. I'm a strong believer that it's completely up to you as individuals to decide whether you want to disclose or whether you want to never disclose your trans identity.
I was right. Nikki De Jager, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but of Nikki Tutorials, does makeup tutorials, has expressed happiness with transition, but was outed, and the partner didn't know. Okay, that's not cool. That's not cool. That's not okay.
Can't be holding this back from them. Take it from me. Share it with them.
One of the things that she brought up that she found difficult was at times throughout her life telling people in her life that she was trans, revealing it to them. And she included her fiance in that, which a lot of people had a lot of opinions about. So it's unclear if they were engaged or not before Nikki came out as trans to her fiance, but what she did say was that they were in a relationship for a minute and he didn't know. And I really do not know the personal details of Nikki and her personal life and her relationship. So it really isn't about Nikki. This is just about a bigger conversation that I feel like is very important. But I saw a post on Instagram. Trans women don't need to tell men they used to be a boy, just like they don't need to tell men they used to be a baby. Disagree? You're transphobic.
I've heard trans activists say it's your fault for not asking. I talked about this in a video I did called Why Violating a Person's Vagina is Worse Than Violating Their Pronouns, about all of these gender fraud cases in the UK, which all involved actually biological females catfishing straight women. But there's a quote in there I read by Natalie Reed, who says, "Now, why is it her obligation to tell you and not your obligation to ask? Here we encounter several layers of cisnormativity and privilege. There is, for instance, how you're walking around simply assuming that everyone ever is cisgender. That is an excellent way to endanger the lives of male transitioners. Create a culture where heterosexual men ask every woman, quote unquote, that they're about to have sex with whether or not they're trans. That is not safe." I also responded to a statement by Jane Fay, who said, "This is not an easy question to answer since it encompasses clashing rights, dissonant truths. There are no easy solutions." And I was like, no, Jane, no. Because the right to not fuck someone always outweighs the right to fuck them. And I just said I don't want anything to do with anyone who believes otherwise, especially something labeled LGBT. So people just need to find people who are going to love them for them. Because there are people like that out there. I didn't consent to being part of an activist movement that doesn't respect other people's sexual boundaries. I do not consent to that. I do not consent to being a part of something that doesn't value sexual consent. No, thank you. I experienced plenty of rejection and loneliness, and so have plenty of same-sex attracted people who live in areas that are in the Midwest where there's no gay scene. We get experimented on all the time. No. Do we see the hypocrisy of people who profoundly reject their own body getting angry at you and calling you a bigot for rejecting the same body that they have rejected? Do we not see that? This is not a civil rights movement. This is something different. This is not like Black people's movement. This is not like gay people's rights movement. Or this is not like the suffragette movement. This is something different.
Does that make sense? Yeah. And so thinking about this, so I had this conversation with myself, as I always do at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning when I'm thinking about gender. And I'm like, wait, if we're judging the success of vaginoplasty by post-surgical orgasm, how do we know people are having orgasms prior to surgery if we're blocking them?
She then goes on this weird story about finding a study about orgasm in children. So thank you for making us talk about this. put up the screen cap. I don't want to read it. It's really unconscionable that this is all being addressed after the fact, and that this could have been predicted in 2008 as the micropenis issue was discussed in a paper then. I want to address the common response to discussing the genital stunting and sexual lobotomizing effects in minors from trans activists. They like to try to accuse you of being some creep inappropriately interested in minors' sexuality and bodies. It's adults' job to care about young people and things that they can't possibly understand at that age. It is adults' job to do that. Yes, sex is important, and relating to sex as an adult is an important part of life, and children do not understand that. Sometimes the accusation is projection, and it often comes from autogynephiles who are not the same cohort as these effeminate, gender dysphoric male children who will all grow up to be same-sex attracted. I have a saying, life is like a David Lynch movie. And if you don't know who David Lynch is, he is a director who does extremely bizarre movies about very weird scenarios, and they're very dreamlike and very nightmarish and symbolic and can be interpreted in different ways in the same way that dreams can. And they often have extremely disturbing characters, but they're fascinating because they really sometimes get at the heart of human nature and how completely bizarre and strange and even outright evil it can be. A woman named Jennifer Gluck has a Substack and helps run a site called Redux, spelled with 2 X's. She has highlighted how some of these males who are advising WPATH, which is a standards of care organization that does indeed have influence over professionals, some of these males have extremely fetishistic, violent fantasies about sissification and genital removal and castration, including ones that involve sexual abuse and torture of children. And they're advising WPATH. They have online spaces. She's gotten into them. Their material with child rape and castration being linked to a site that WPATH is linking to. So some of this stuff gets weirder and weirder and more extreme. She's talked about the Scopsy and other castration cults in history. So this is just a weird thing that some people are into. And they're writing porn about it, involving children and advising WPATH. I used to think some of the radfems were really kind of paranoid and transphobic when I first got into this issue. And I figured all of the adults who were super obsessed with transitioning children at young ages were just nice people who cared about their mental health. Now I believe that the radfems were right, in the sense that some of these individuals are quite creepy. And these are some big names. So I'm going to read something from one of Gluck's articles. This is on Redux. This is Johnson has published research based on surveys he has personally conducted with other members of the archives. His academic interests advocate for expanding the concept of gender identity to include men with sadomasochistic and even pedophilic castration fantasies, something that has now been included as a male-to-eunuch identity in the draft standard of care for the World Professional Association Transgender Health, WPATH, an international medical body that sets guidelines, including those related to the transitioning of children. As previously reported by Redux, the Eunuch Archives hosts over 300,000 pieces of fictional child pornography that detail the rape, torture, and killing of children. In some narratives, children with stunted puberty are raped by doctors. In others, children are castrated by force as part of a sadistic sexual torture ritual. According to Johnson's own research, the majority of site members who participated in a survey cited sexual fantasy as their main reason for interest in castration. Some survey participants asserted that they became sexually aroused when witnessing animal castration. Additionally, group members have used the forum to request information regarding doctors willing to perform orchiectomies without a psychiatric evaluation. There are also personal ads where participants request partners for BDSM acts, seeking total body modification. Slave in search of master that would like to take a boy and transform it into an exotic fetish toy. In addition to Johnson, the identities of 2 other leading site members have also been determined by Redux as similarly prominent academics. Richard J. Wassersug has for over 20 years used the alias Unique on the forum, while Krister H. Willett, who has been active in the community since 1998, uses the screen name Christoph. Both men, along with Johnson, presented much research they co-authored together at a 2009 conference in Oslo held by WPATH. Wassersug was an honorary professor in the Department of Cellular and Physiological Sciences at the University of British Columbia, but has also been affiliated with Dalhousie and La Trobe universities. I hope I pronounced those right. In May 2010, the contents of the Oslo presentation were published in the International Journal of Transgenderism. Okay, so these individuals are in their journal, speaking at WPATH conferences in 2011, according to this article. It was during this conference that the decision was made to declassify gender identity disorder as a psychological condition. In its place, gender dysphoria would become the recommended terminology. So these people have a fair amount of influence. Even some of the more run-of-the-mill, I guess, AGPs, some of the top activists like Julia Serrano have these forced feminization fantasies. Okay, and Julia Serrano is one of the gender dysphoria affirmative working group members that I told you about. Okay, need to zoom in here. While I've never really believed the cliche about women being good for only one thing, I found that sentiment kept creeping into my fantasies. I would imagine myself being sold into sex slavery and having strange men take advantage of me. It's called forced feminization, and it's not really about sex. It is about turning the humiliation you feel into pleasure, transforming the loss of male privilege into the best fuck ever. And I just want to say, I know people have weird sexual fantasies, like, I'm not going after people about that, but the loss of male privilege into the best fuck ever is pretty much indicative of autogynephilia. That's its own particular thing. It's not a woman's sexuality. It's not a lesbian sexuality. It's not a female sexuality. Saying so is creepy and dishonest. Should we worry that the Main Standards of Care organization has members advising them that have child castration porn fantasies involving torture and rape of children? Should we worry about that? And then this organization is advising professionals through standards of care that are castrating children in real life? Should we be worried about that? Yes. Yes, we should. Because sometimes life is like a David Lynch movie.
This has to come down here.
I mean, this is off-center. See, this is tilted. So that in order to get this midline, we need to bring that down more. And that will centralize this.
I think we're saying the same thing. I'm happy. I have a good sense of what we need to do. Let me just take a picture, too. Poor thing. You could be a porn star for all the photos are taken. God, I'm so sorry. I did not say that.
We have to just keep joking around here, or otherwise we don't get through.
Right. We wouldn't have made it.
I guess I'll get dressed again.
You get dressed again.
This is such an extreme field, and it's weird. You see a lot of weird things, and it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder over time. Like how Marci Bowers is gonna perhaps start using tilapia fish skin to make neo-vaginas. Apparently, it's healthy and safe. Okay, March 2016, Facebook. Johanna. Hi friends, wondering if WPATH SOC8 might be changing guidelines around genital surgery in trans young women younger than 18. Here's the issue. These girls are blocked at early puberty. So by high school, they have been living and presenting as their authentic selves, but are forced to navigate high school with 11-year-old male genitals until 18. I have a handful of girls, and many more coming up, whose lives are on hold because of this. They're ready. Their families are ready to support aftercare. They have strong mental health support, but the insurance won't cover because of the WPATH recs. Thoughts? All right, so here she is pushing for younger medicalization, including surgeries. At one point, I mentioned these people rolling around rapturously on a bed of scalpels and Lupron and testosterone syringes, and this is what I mean. They want the youths to get the vaginoplasty surgeries underage because, and I've heard her say this, and there's other ones who've said this, they are too young to adhere to their dilation schedule post-surgery. They don't want them going off to college and then not dilating their vaginoplasty surgery and having it close up. So they are old enough to nuke their sex organs in their tweens and make that decision that will impact them for the rest of their lives. But they are not mature enough to adhere to a dilation schedule post-surgery. Okay? So I just want to make that point. Second point, why are they encouraging these young people to believe that their lives are on hold? This is the second time she said that. The other clip said that too. Why are they encouraging them to see their lives as being in stagnation? I do not think these people are good mental health role models. I'm sorry, they're not teaching them emotional regulation. They're feeding into their drama. They're feeding into their gender dysphoria. Sometimes that type of thing makes that stuff worse. So now they have to have the perfect lives where their lives can be moved forward once they have a rectosigmoid or peritoneal lining, stomach lining, vaginoplasty surgery. Then life can start. Life can finally begin. You see how they're setting them up for disappointment and lack of emotional regulation? And I've listened to a lot of hours of audio from these gender clinic conferences, and they often talk about the honeymoon period, which really makes this seem more like body dysmorphic disorder than other things, right? Than just a small medical tweak. And the problem with body dysmorphic disorder is plastic surgery is contraindicated for it. So it's like your life's on hold until you get the puberty blockers, and then now your life's on hold because you're in a stunted puberty and you need the cross-sex hormones. And then you're on the hormones and now you need the double mastectomy. And then you get the double mastectomy and then now you need the bottom surgery. They're certainly feeding into that with your life is on hold messaging. They're also being set up not to be able to emotionally handle the other things that you have set them up for, that you have done to them. You've done this to them because they're young people when they're being put on this path by you. They're not going to really manage their honeymoon effect. They're not going to be able to psychologically handle major things going wrong with the vaginoplasty surgery, as is common. They're going to start to obsess about other things about their bodies that they don't like, and they're not going to be able to handle it because you haven't taught them to. Then they're going to have to tell people that they're dating or hide it, which it seems more doing. And then if the partner finds out, you're going to have to now worry about getting beaten up. Then you're going to have to worry about the health problems from the cross-sex hormones. And then you're going to have to later pay for your fertility treatments or adoption or whatever because you've now sterilized yourself. The life could always be on hold. These are some reasons why I don't buy into the moral panic that these gender clinicians have created in order to justify doing this, and her continuing to do this, even giving Lupron to 10 or 2 males. There are cultures that are supportive of feminine males, and it's just considered part of life. They have low rates of medicalization because it's integrated into their culture. And look at Paul Vassie's work, because he said that they actually have it better than in Canada. That's super woke and very supportive of even the most extreme trans activist demands, and publicly funded healthcare for double mastectomies and even bottom surgeries, I think. If you have watched the television episodes on Jazz Jennings, you know that Jazz's genitals were stunted, and due to the micropenis issue, Jazz is unable to experience any sexual satisfaction. And Jazz had to undergo an experimental vaginoplasty surgery using the peritoneal lining that turned blue in a pre-necrotic state and fell apart, and needed several corrective surgeries. And I want to make a point that beyond that horror show, there was another just general wrong that was perpetrated against that youth. Jazz appears to have no normal developed sexual orientation at all. It's not just the surgery went wrong, or even that like sexual satisfaction isn't going to work out. It's even the psychological impacts of giving this male child puberty blockers at such a young age. So here's a video of Jazz Jennings saying, "I'm pansexual."
I've still never been in a relationship, but like more and more each day, I consider myself pansexual. I used to be like 70% guys, 30% girls. I think I'm more towards like 50-50 now.
You identify yourself as pansexual. For people that don't understand what that's like, how would you describe your journey with that?
I basically say that it's like love without limits. I love a person for who they are on the inside, regardless of their label, their sexual orientation, their gender. I just love people for who they are. So, I mean, I haven't really dated a whole lot.
None of these effeminate males in the past have ever been sexually attracted to girls, okay? They are always homosexual males. That would be really unusual. I don't think this person has any idea who they really fundamentally are. They weren't allowed to become who they fundamentally are because puberty was blown up for them. I didn't come up with this analogy, but kids are not MX potato heads with mix and match parts that you can just move around without very serious consequences.
How many people saw the Jazz episode where the surgeon said you can't have a vagina? No, yes. Wasn't that terrifying? I thought it was really unfortunate.
Yes. Yes, it was. And so's the fact gender outlier kids are in your hands. And the fact that you've done this to dozens of males, I don't know. There's really no research data that justifies this other than the moral panic these people have whipped themselves up into. And they've been whipped up into this moral panic by some very mentally unwell, middle-aged lesbians and autogynephiles who have transitioned as adults with properly formed brains and bones and fertility and sexual function. Okay? That's who's whipped these doctors up into this protocol. So this is now what the rainbow flag represents. Or maybe that new hideous progress flag you see everywhere. This has taken over all of the previous gay rights organizations. This is what they're all pushing, underage medicalization. They're fighting any attempts to stop it. This is the rainbow flag issue. Do you like that? LGBT people? I mean, I know there's a lot of you that do, but you gotta own it. You gotta own all of this. You gotta own Jazz's collapsed vaginoplasty surgery, and you've gotta own all the other non-functional youth who are gonna grow up with really no capability of having adult relationships. You gotta own that. The bone health damage. You have to own that. I understand a lot of people just generally have been very manipulated by the media narrative, which is very dishonest. There's no trans murder epidemic. The suicide issue's manipulated. Medical transition is promoted as healthy and life-saving. I know there's that drumbeat, and I can't blame people for believing it because it's everywhere. But for those just blindly going along with this, there's no way some of these very young kids wouldn't have made a different decision if you just let them get into adulthood. I just have to say, I don't understand how you're not bothered by that. People who support this, who particularly who are gay men. Is it just like, sure, I'll castrate some kids who might just be gay for my trans allyship? If they would, how many would you be comfortable with being essentially sterilized and chemically castrated like this? Like what percent? 5? 50? Yeah, I don't get you. I'm talking to you, Benjamin Law. There's plenty of you. Even Dan Savage seemed to endorse this on Bill Maher's show when Deborah Soh was raising alarm bells and stating that this is likely pretty dangerous to some pre-gay kids. Even the gay men that are involved in this directly. I'm not attacking the gay male community. There's plenty of blame to go around for this. Among lesbians, bisexuals, definitely. And then there's those of us that oppose this, right? So I'm not attacking any whole group. But this is one of the worst downsides of this. What they've done to these male children in this age range. So you gotta own it if you love this. There's a lot of cost to this. And I'm just wondering why there's so much enthusiastic support among gay men for doing this when the real damage that's going to result from it will be on these effeminate gay male youths. And I'm just wondering why there's so much acting like, people are bitches for worrying about this, the smug self-righteousness, even among gay men. I don't get you. I do not get you. I do not get why you do not understand the profound damage that you do to a person when you completely wipe their entire sexuality and normal adult development in puberty. So they will never have a healthy, fully realized adult relationship before they even got to explore those feelings or like date or fall in love. I don't get you. I don't get you. I mean, don't people have the right to grow up, and isn't it terrible when they don't get to do that? Even if there's not tons of lawsuits, I had an interesting conversation with another parent that's been involved with this who made a really good point. And at one point, there was some medical advances that were going to help deaf children that had some kind of congenital, genetically inherited deafness. And so they would have deaf parents. And I think they came up with some way to help them. And there was offense in the deaf community, some members, or maybe even amongst some of the parents, because people have a whole culture in that community. They have sign language, it's very flirty and expressive, and they have their own way of life. And so they found it almost offensive to consider that actually curing this in children would be a good idea. So I think you're going to have something similar. You're going to have completely sexually stunted adults who've never experienced, full sexual pleasure and connecting with a person in that way in a romantic love relationship. And they're just going to take offense at the idea that this is bad because they've never really experienced that. But you know what? Any person who can hear and has heard rock music or rap or hip hop or classical music or whatever you're into knows it is better to be able to hear than to be deaf. So I don't even care if these minors don't know what they're missing, and it doesn't matter. It's a profoundly horrible thing to do to a kid. So enjoy your little eugenic side effects and abuse, because it comes with the package. I just don't get the people who think that doing this to a person is not a big deal. I don't get you. Is it just, well, if I need to castrate some proto-gay kids for my trans allyship, that's fine. I still get to F my partners? Are you no fats, no femmes? So who cares? Do you think that you're saving the trans community by going along with this? Because you're not. They still have a lot of problems after this, new ones that have been created by this. Thanks for listening. I think the next one I'll do will also involve Diane Ehrensaft and Johanna Olson-Kennedy, and I will examine their statements that indicate just how truly sloppy their diagnostic criteria are and how these minors are truly lab rat medical experiments. Thank you for listening.